After Cambyses II's death, Darius, commander of the Persian spearmen, assumed power. The Achaemenid nobles chose him as king for his courage and royal blood. Known as the conqueror of 3 continents, Darius was a skilled statesman who outmaneuvered rivals, fought battles, and quelled rebellions. In the Behistun inscriptions, he references his ancestors. He also ordered the construction of Persepolis, a gathering place for satrapies in the Achaemenid Empire, while ensuring a lasting legacy for future generations. After Cyrus the Great, his son Cambyses II succeeded him. Cambyses, like his father, was a powerful and authoritative king, and he was supposed to continue the work his father had started. Cyrus had plans to march toward Mesopotamia and conquer Egypt. However, fate had other plans, and Cyrus passed away before he could carry out this task. When Cambyses II ascended to the throne, he prepared his army. But before leaving Iran, he did something strange. He killed his own brother, Bardiya, because he suspected that Bardiya might betray him in his absence, declare himself king, and ultimately challenge his rule. This incident led to varying opinions about Cambyses among historians. Some remember Cambyses favorably because he conquered Egypt, but many historians, even within Iran, view Cambyses negatively and believe that he did not follow in his father's footsteps and took actions that were somewhat hostile. One of the commanders in Cambyses II's army was Darius. Darius, who was at that time the commander of the Persian spearmen, a special unit of soldiers with spears, had not yet tasted the sweetness of ruling and sovereignty. The military campaign towards Egypt was carried out successfully. Cambyses' soldiers managed to conquer Egypt, and it became another satrapy of the Achaemenid Empire. From this point on, some of the Achaemenid kings' names were recorded as pharaohs of Egypt in Egyptian history. For about 4 years, Achaemenid forces were stationed in Egypt, spending their time there. However, in 522 BCE, some very bad news reached them from Ecbatana, which is modern-day Hamadan. Ecbatana was the political capital of the Achaemenids, a city that had gained significance since the time of the Medes and remained important during the Achaemenid era. When Cambyses II heard the news, he felt that staying in Egypt was no longer in his best interest and that he needed to go to Hamadan to suppress the internal rebellion. But what was the story of this uprising in Hamadan? In Hamadan, a man named Gormata declared himself as the king. Gormata was a religious fanatic, but he bore a striking resemblance to Bardiya. In Hamadan, Gormata instigated a rebellion, presenting himself as Bardiya and claiming to be the rightful heir, stating that he would follow in the footsteps of Cyrus the Great. When Cambyses II heard this news, he couldn't tolerate it. He prepared his forces, left Egypt, and marched toward Hamadan. He also entrusted the command of Egypt to Darius to ensure the region did not fall out of their control. However, Cambyses II never reached Hamadan. According to the Behistun inscription, which is an inscription authored by Darius the Great, Cambyses was killed by his own hand. The exact circumstances of Cambyses' death are unclear. Some believe that he committed suicide on the way, while others suggest it may have been an accidental death. When the news of Cambyses' death reached the Iranian forces in Egypt, the nobles convened a council and requested Darius the Great to become Cambyses' successor. Darius was the cousin of Cambyses and had Achaemenid blood in his veins. According to the laws of that time, the next king had to be from the Achaemenid dynasty, and both Cambyses II and Bardiya were deceased. Therefore, another Achaemenid was needed to continue the kingship. The nobles' consensus turned towards Darius, who was a very courageous individual and considered the nephew of Cyrus the Great. He was also the commander of the Persian spearmen and had proven his competence in battles. Because of these qualities, they asked Darius the Great to march towards Ecbatana, suppress the internal rebellion, and become the next ruler of the Achaemenids. Darius the Great was born in 549 BCE in Pars. His mother was Rhodagun, and his father was Hystaspes. Hystaspes was a distinguished officer in the service of Cyrus the Great, and he had been appointed as a prominent satrap of Bactria. Furthermore, after the death of Cyrus the Great, Hystaspes continued to serve as a special advisor to Cambyses II and was well informed about all the events within this dynasty. In the inscription of Darius the Great at Behistun, in the second paragraph, lines 3 to 6, it is stated as follows: "My father is Hystaspes, the father of Hystaspes is Arsames, the father of Arsames is Ariaramnes, the father of Ariaramnes is Thespes, the father of Thespes is Achaemenes." In the continuation, in the third paragraph, lines 6 to 8, Darius further explains, "Thus, we are called Achaemenids. We have been great since ancient times. From ancient times, our dynasty has been royal." From this inscription and the historical records, it is quite evident that Darius the Great was of noble birth within the Achaemenid dynasty and was raised much like other royalty and nobility of his time. Darius the Great decided to leave Egypt and head towards Hamadan to quell the internal rebellion. His first destination was the city of Susa, because Persian tribes were present there. He entered Susa, united the tribes with him, formed a mighty army, and then proceeded towards Hamadan. During this time, Gormata, or the Persian pretender, had been ruling deceptively for about 7 months. Darius the Great, with his allied forces, engaged in a fierce battle with Gormata's forces in Hamadan. In this confrontation, Gormata's forces suffered a severe defeat at the hands of Darius. Ecbatana once again became a secure and powerful city of the Achaemenids, and this rebellion was completely crushed by Darius the Great. Darius held great respect for all the nobles, tribes, and satrapies within the Achaemenid Empire, especially those that had become part of the Achaemenid realm under Cyrus the Great. He believed that these satrapies should remain united, as they were all integral parts of the Achaemenid Empire, and that orders should be issued from the center. However, during the 4 years that Cambyses and Darius were in Egypt, a significant number of these satrapies had declared independence. They sent messengers to Darius, asking him to negotiate with these rulers, recognize their independence officially, and prevent military conflicts between them. According to the Behistun inscription, these internal wars lasted for a full 3 years until Darius was able to bring all these satrapies back into the Achaemenid realm. Some of the most important regions that had revolted included Media, Khuzestan, Assyria, Parthia, Cappadocia, and Scythia. In the Behistun inscription, Darius the Great makes references to all these cities and explains how he suppressed the rebels within 3 years. Darius the Great was a highly skilled statesman who always had an eye on the future and the legacy he would leave for the generations to come in his land. One of his most fascinating undertakings was the recording of the events of his time. In the region that separated Babylon, Susa, and Ecbatana, Darius the Great erected an inscription that is known as the Behistun inscription. In this inscription, we can see Darius depicted with a bow in his left hand and his right hand raised in respect to Ahura Mazda, the highest deity in Zoroastrianism. Darius has placed his foot on the chest of Gormata. Behind him, we can observe a bowman and a spearman, representing Vidafana and Gobryas, the husband of Darius's sister. This inscription serves as a significant historical record of Darius's achievements and policies. Historians suggest that when we look at this ancient relief today, we can see 9 individuals standing in front of Darius the Great, all bound in chains, kneeling, and showing signs of submission. These individuals had become captives in the hands of Darius. Historians believe that the 9th figure was added to the relief 3 years after the initial carving. In reality, there were originally 8 individuals in this relief. The story takes us back to the Scythian region. It is said that within 3 years, Darius the Great managed to pacify all other regions and satrapies, bringing all those who had rebelled under his control. These inscriptions were created to make it clear that no one would dare to rebel again because such a fate would befall them. However, after these inscriptions, the Scythian region became rebellious, and a new wave of rebellion emerged. Darius then entered the Scythian region and restored order there as well. When this event occurred, Darius ordered that the 9th figure be added to the relief. The names of these 9 rebels are inscribed on the second panel of the Behistun inscription. Darius the Great says, "This is what I have done. Everything I have done was with the help of Ahura Mazda. When I became king, I fought 19 battles, and with the aid and assistance of Ahura Mazda, I defeated their armies and captured 9 kings." The text of this inscription is written in the Elamite script, and this event was carried out at the command of Darius the Great. It is said that after securing Hamadan and subduing Gormata, the next region was Khuzestan. There, a man named Atrina had raised a rebellion and declared that he would not obey the Achaemenids. Darius the Great's forces moved toward Khuzestan, defeated Atrina, and the city was once again under the Achaemenids' control. The next city that rebelled was Babylon. Darius the Great and his forces moved toward Babylon, and the city was besieged for 4 days. After that, Babylon also came under the control of Darius the Great, and the rebellious leader was decapitated at the command of Darius. Ultimately, with the assistance of leaders from the Median and Persian tribes, after numerous battles and significant efforts, Darius managed to quell all internal rebellions within 3 years, restoring peace and tranquility to the Achaemenid Empire. Before becoming king, Darius the Great was married to the daughter of Gobryas, known as Ratabarme. However, after ascending to the throne, he also married a daughter of Cyrus the Great named Atusa. These marriages were highly favored among the Achaemenid dynasties, as they believed that marriage should primarily be within the royal family. Distressing news arrived from Egypt and Libya. In Lydia, there was a king named Herodes who defied all the orders of Darius the Great. While Darius was busy quelling internal rebellions, he requested military support from Herodes, but the latter did not send any forces to aid Darius. Furthermore, Herodes refused to pay the annual tribute to the Achaemenids, declaring that they had an independent government and would not obey the Achaemenid rule. Darius initially sought peaceful resolution, sending an envoy to Herodes, but this envoy was killed upon arrival. All these actions by Herodes deeply angered Darius the Great. Darius, known for his strong leadership and desire to maintain order in the vast Achaemenid Empire, saw Herodes' actions as a direct challenge to his authority. This eventually led to Darius embarking on a campaign against Herodes and the regions of Lydia, marking a significant military expedition in the history of the Achaemenid Empire. These events also occurred in Egypt. The Achaemenids had left Egypt for a while, and there were uprisings there too. A person named Ariandes had rebelled in Egypt. Darius the Great had no choice but to send armies to these 2 regions. He decided to launch attacks on these 2 satrapies in such a way that they wouldn't have a chance to defend themselves. He prepared an army himself and gave orders for the appointment of a capable commander, Megabyzus I, to lead the other army. Megabyzus I's original name was Bagabuxus I, an Iranian name, but the Greeks used the name Megabyzus. Many Persian books later used the name Megabyzus as well. Megabyzus was one of the noble Persians, and Darius the Great had a great liking for him. There's also a story in ancient Iranian history that goes like this: Darius the Great was once sitting somewhere, eating pomegranates. His brother came to him and asked, "O great king, if you could ask for something from the world in an unlimited quantity, like the seeds of this pomegranate, what would it be?" Darius replied to his brother, "Megabyzus. Because if I had megabyzus in the same quantity as these pomegranate seeds, I would be as if I had the entire world. I would even conquer the world, and I wouldn't even want Greece." Darius the Great's army marched towards Egypt, and Megabyzus's army advanced towards Lydia. When Herodes learned that Achaemenid forces were approaching his borders, he ordered his troops to prepare for defense and guard their borders. A battle ensued between Herodes' forces and Megabyzus's forces. During this conflict, Lydia suffered a significant defeat, and Megabyzus successfully captured Lydia. Around the same time, Darius the Great's army approached Egypt. However, before Darius the Great himself entered Egypt, a messenger arrived in Egypt and delivered the news of Lydia's defeat to Achaemenid. Upon realizing that Darius the Great was commanding the troops coming towards Egypt, Achaemenid decided not to resist. Achaemenid opened the gates of Egypt and submitted to Darius the Great's will. He claimed that he had been deceived and had no intention of opposing Darius. This situation was very favorable for Darius the Great, and he decided to retain Achaemenid as the ruler of Egypt. Egypt once again became a part of the Achaemenid Empire. To gain the approval of the Egyptian people, Darius the Great ordered the restoration and reconstruction of all Egyptian temples. Another significant action Darius took in Egypt was to command Artaxerxes, one of the greatest scholars of ancient Iran, to connect the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. During this period, Darius the Great received the title Son of the Sun. This was a great achievement in ancient times, and Darius rewarded Artaxerxes greatly. The canal was named after Artaxerxes, known as the Xerxes Canal, which is now commonly referred to as the Suez Canal. It fell into disrepair for some time until we reached the modern era, when the Suez Canal was established by French engineers. Before leaving Egypt, Darius the Great ensured the security of the land by establishing a massive garrison filled with Persian and Egyptian troops. He decided to make all of North Africa part of the Achaemenid Empire. After addressing the affairs in Egypt, Darius's army moved towards western Egypt, which is known as Libya. The Achaemenid army successfully conquered Libya, making it another part of the Achaemenid Empire. After these remarkable achievements, Darius the Great left Africa and returned to Iran. On his way back, in the year 518 BCE, they entered Mavdasht and reached a mountain range known as the Mer Mountains or Mountain of Mer, which is today referred to as Mount Ramat. Darius the Great observed this scene and declared that a grand structure should be built here. It was here that Darius the Great ordered the construction of Persepolis, originally known as Parse. The construction of Persepolis was initiated at the command of Darius the Great. However, this structure continued to expand over time as each of the Achaemenid princes and kings added their own contributions to the complex. The building was never completed and was left partially unfinished because the Achaemenid dynasty fell, and in time, the site was forgotten. Persepolis was not the capital of the Achaemenids, it was a monumental structure for hosting important Achaemenid ceremonies and annual celebrations such as Mayragan, Tirgan, and Nowruz. Various satrapies typically appointed their own envoys to represent them and convey their messages to the king. These envoys would enter Persepolis and present valuable gifts to the Persian king. Grand ceremonies were held here, attended by the general public as well. In 514 BCE, Darius the Great decided to deal with the unruly Scythians. The Scythians had been causing considerable trouble for the Achaemenid Empire during this time, engaging in numerous conflicts with Achaemenid forces. In the same year, Darius was informed that the Scythians were causing unrest in the Caucasus Mountains. Darius the Great chose to march towards the Caucasus Mountains with the intention of conducting a military campaign and teaching the Scythians a lesson. He battled with the Scythian forces in the region and inflicted such a heavy defeat upon them that the Scythians had no further intentions of causing trouble for the Achaemenids. The Scythian envoy kneeled before Darius the Great and declared that they would no longer engage in hostilities against the Achaemenids. They informed Darius that another group of Scythians was located on the other side of the Black Sea, along the banks of the Danube River, and there was a possibility that these Scythians might pose a threat to the empire in the future. This situation provided a sufficient pretext for Darius the Great to contemplate an expedition to the Western Europe. However, the primary reason for Darius the Great's military campaign across the Black Sea was not a conflict with the Scythians, but rather a confrontation with the Greeks. Darius the Great had such strong military foresight that he could anticipate a future conflict between the Iranians and the Greeks. Therefore, he decided to weaken the Greek forces. The best course of action was to prevent the Greeks from accessing their essential supplies, which were primarily transported to Greece through warships and included both military equipment and grain. Darius the Great took action to ensure that these crucial ships would no longer reach the Greek harbors. In 513 BCE, Darius's army entered Europe and the Balkan Peninsula. Darius the Great decided to deal with the Scythians before engaging with the Greeks. He believed that the Scythians were weaker than the Greeks and could be easily defeated. The Persian army advanced into the Scythian territory. However, as they moved forward, they noticed that the Scythians were retreating and employing guerrilla warfare tactics. Their resistance continued. Darius's forces encountered scorched earth tactics when they entered areas with fertile agricultural lands. The Scythians had set fire to these lands, and the wells were blocked with stones, preventing the Persians from accessing water. This hostile strategy made it challenging for the Persian army to continue its campaign. As winter approached, Darius the Great realized that no matter how far he advanced, he couldn't catch the Scythians. The Scythian tribal leaders were determined not to surrender to Darius and stated that they wouldn't negotiate, insisting that he should leave their territory. Darius decided not to advance any further. The pursuit and evasion had lasted for 2 months. Darius the Great appointed Megabyzus as the commander of the forces in that region and instructed him to maintain control of the area. He ordered Megabyzus to go towards the Greeks and conquer the islands surrounding Greece, preventing their ships from entering Greek territory and delivering supplies to the Greek army. Darius the Great assigned these missions to Megabyzus and then returned to Iran. Bagabaks and Persian soldiers managed to capture coastal areas of Greece and Macedonia one after another and advance north towards Greece. In this way, Darius the Great extended his control over the trade centers for wheat and timber in Greece, located in the region of Thrace along the Black Sea. The conquest of the southeastern Balkan Peninsula brought Iran and Greece closer together, bordering each other on European soil. Darius the Great became the first king in world history to rule over all 3 continents, Asia, Europe, and Africa. In this period of remarkable victories, Darius the Great's victories were continuing. In 512 BCE, Darius ordered his forces to advance eastward towards the region of Punjab. He had a reason for this action. He believed that the area was strategically and economically crucial. Darius thought that if they could conquer this region, the Achaemenid Empire's economy would prosper significantly. Consequently, under Darius the Great's command, Achaemenid ships attacked the shores of the Indian subcontinent, capturing cities around the Indus and Punjab rivers. After the conquest of these regions, large quantities of gold flowed into Iran annually. This was because this region had a larger population compared to other provinces of the Achaemenid Empire, and more taxes were generated. Managing such a vast empire required a set of specific laws and regulations. Therefore, after 10 years of wars and expansion, Darius the Great decided to focus on internal affairs and introduced reforms in the administrative and governmental systems of the Achaemenid Empire, leaving behind a valuable legacy that endures to this day. If you enjoyed this video, do not forget to like it, and share it with your friends. Do not hesitate to provide your view regarding this video by putting your comments below. Your comments would help us to improve our work, and also, they help us to take your views into account for the future topics that we select. Furthermore, you can subscribe to our channel to become aware of our new videos.